Hello, this is Joe Rankin from Bettendorf High School, and I am going to be going through some material here regarding a middle school speech and debate program. We are restarting our program here at Bettendorf for the first time in about 9 years, and I figured we would make some videos to kind of go through some of the information that I share with students and parents, and giving you a chance to see how I'm doing it. You can critique if good or bad, and take what you will and maybe do it yourself. So here's where we're going. So this is the opening slides that I did for the introductory meeting. I had this meeting about 3 weeks ago with my parents and students. I went through and I advertised a couple of things with some posters, put up some announcements over the school intercom, and talked with various students and teachers into the building as well as the principal. And then we had a meeting, and this is what I went over. So here we go. First and foremost, I always started with an overview of the team. This is from our own high school perspective, but also I just try to have a nice bullet list to indicate what we're going to be going through in that meeting. And this meeting was for any interested 6th through 8th grade students as well as their parents to attend, so that way I could show them what we were going to be doing over the next about 2 months and kind of go through things. And this is what I went over with them. And so in terms of team information, I find it especially important for middle school students who are going to hopefully be coming up to the high school and working with the high school program that they understand what this is all about. And so I just go through a brief overview on the competitive academics and how it's a team focus, not individual with an individual performance, and how we're part of the National Speech and Debate Association and the current coaches that are working through. So I work at Bettendorf High School. I'm the head coach, and I've been there for about 21 years. And I did get some help with my assistant coach who's been there for about 2 years now. And I also had a chance to go through and introduce some of the student volunteers, which I found that to be a big part of this program is when you give high school students a chance to give back. And that could be through, volunteer work, or it could be through different things that you can sign off for them for NHS credit for working with different groups. But this is a way for them to take some ownership over things. Then I'm not going to go through too many of these slides, but I just kind of offered up certain types of events, and I found it to be, at least for my own personal stance, to go over different things in grouped events. And so what I'm offering this year is interpretation, where they can do dramatic, duo, or humorous. And I went over the basics for the event there. I also had a second group, which was just public speaking, where I talked about original oratory and informative speaking. And the way I broke that down was I just described it as, if you want to persuade us, you're going to be doing it without any kind of visuals or anything, but it'll just be you. And then informative, if you wanted to use some visuals with no tech, you could do that. So that was the distinguishing point. And so I am grouping these students into one group of interpretation only, and then another group that is public speaking from the beginning. So that way we could focus on those individual skill sets, because interp, for the most part, despite the script differences, that is one skill set, and public speaking would be a separate skill set, but one would be with visuals and with those added items, and original oratory would be more persuasive in nature but without those things. And that's how I sold it to them. In terms of debate, I only offer 2 different types of debate, although I know there are more than that. In my world, I just decided to focus on, if you have no partner, we're going to do Lincoln Douglas debate, where it's kind of lawyer training. And if you do want a partner, we're going to call that public forum debate, and it'll be a team debate. And you can decide how you want to do that on your own, but that's just kind of the breakdown that I took upon myself. I feel confident enough with my 21 years of experience, my assistant coach, and my high schoolers that I have, that we could support these events in a way that would make sense. Even though I don't have a ton of public forum debate on my high school team right now, I did think that we had enough resources to cover these 2 things without too much trouble. Then I did give the students the topics that we were going to be debating, and this is something that I think it's good to have some community involvement. So if you are going to be doing this with more schools in your district or in your area, that it's important that you state from the beginning what kind of topics you're going to be going for. For Lincoln Douglas debate, I chose the March-April topic because it's a little bit less used in my region, and I thought that that would give a more fair ground for everybody coming in. And for public forum, at the time when I was making this, the April topic hadn't been put out yet, but I also decided on the March one in particular because, again, due to regional reasons, this topic isn't used all that often. And so I thought it would be more of a clean slate for people as they went into things. Then in terms of things, I did go over the tournament schedule. I had been working with another program, Sudlow, and they wanted to have another tournament. And so we are going to offer the Bulldog Invitational on Saturday, May 9th. And I did put through all of this information on Tabrim before the meeting was done. So that way all of this was broadcast out to the state and the region, really. So that way all of this was set in stone beforehand before I introduced it to my parents and students. So we had a set goal. So really there's a catch-22 on that one. If you go ahead and set all of this up ahead of time and nothing happens, then you did work for nothing. But I also found that at least setting all of this up, it made it more real for the parents, more real for the students, and it gave me some clear set goals, and the planning was done ahead of time. And then the optional tournament was one that Sudlow was going to be doing, and so I put that on the calendar. I said it would be the general setup, but at the time I didn't have that information, and so it was just something that I would let them know about. And so far the students have been, looking forward to both. In terms of the practice schedule, you're going to have to figure out this in advance as well. For me and this time of year, I found that Tuesday and Thursday, 2 nights a week for an hour and a half worked out really well. Your own schedule may differ. If I had had fourth block prep, which I have had in the past, I would have been going down to the middle school and working right after school. But this year I did not have that ability, so I'm teaching to the end of the school day at the high school, and that didn't really work out too well with the middle school, who gets out a little bit earlier than the high school. So I set the clock a little bit later and decided for an hour and a half, 2 times a week, and I gave clear instructions on where to go, because for the middle schoolers coming to the high school, they don't always come to this building or go through the building, and so I wanted to make sure I had that information ready to go. Then I did talk a little bit directly to parents and talked about how I could be asking for their help as time goes on. This was about 2 months before the actual event would occur, and so I wanted to give them notice about what would be necessary, and it's usually just on the day of the tournament through concession help or judging help. And so that was 2 of the things that I wanted to go over with them and to try to make that clear from the beginning. Then I did give them a couple of things to do, and I'm going to show you these lists and forms here in just a second, but one of them was the student info form. The second is the health permission form, and then there was a bigger packet with more detail. But this was just the PowerPoint that I went through in order to kind of sell the program and talk with them. And it's really hard to tell how many people you're going to get that first meeting or whether they're going to come back. And so it's good to be clear and upfront about things as we go through. So I'm going to shut that down, and I'll show you these other forms here. This is the team guideline form. This is a packet of, I believe it is about 3 pages long, where I did go through just more meat and potatoes items from the actual PowerPoint, the PowerPoint being the simplified version, this being the more in-depth. But I did give some team background, some coaching instruction, the tournament schedule, the practice schedule, all of the things that were in the PowerPoint. But one of the bigger things that I do like to do, and this was just me trying to figure things out a little bit on my own too, was to give a week-by-week breakdown for the parents to know what they would be doing. Because with these students coming up to a program that was, starting from scratch, they kind of needed to know what they were getting into and how things would go. And even though they don't need to know every single thing on this form, this is more in line just to let them know if they were gone for certain things or what we do at certain practices. When I'm working with middle school students as compared to the high school, they're just used to a different kind of schedule and a different kind of commitment level. And so I wanted to make sure that I had this ready to go. And so, again, all of this is front-loaded planning, and I do think it takes quite a bit, which is why I think that this might be useful for people who are trying to do the same. But this calendar was really helpful for me too, because as we're going through, I had clear idea of what days those were. I was able to look at it and align it with the high school teaching schedule, because we're finishing quarter 3 into quarter 4, and grades are due on certain days, and parent-teacher conferences are certain days, and those kinds of things. And so I wanted to make sure I had that somewhat outlined ahead of time. Then again, I already went over the parent-volunteer stuff in the meeting, but this gives it more of a breakdown so they can look at that when they get back home, because this is a document that they get to keep. And then I did mention a couple of other things that weren't on the slides. One is dress code for tournaments, just so they kind of got that idea. We were only going to 1 or 2 as opposed to the high school schedule, which is probably going to be a lot more, but at least they would know exactly what that was going to be doing, and that we'd address that later on in the practice cycle too. I did talk about transportation a little bit in terms of how we're going to get to tournaments, and some disciplinary action, which I don't really think I needed to address too much, but you never know, and it's better to address it now rather than later. Then I gave some contact info and some online resources, but again, didn't focus too heavily on that. This is middle school. We're only doing 1 or 2 tournaments in the way that we're running things, and so it wasn't a big concern. The second document I gave, which is one that I asked the students to fill out to take some ownership of things and to think about, is just this very simple info form. I have done this as a Google form before as well, but for this particular thing, I thought it would be better just to have the information given to me on paper form. And so just their name, their grade, their cell phone, their personal email, their parent contact information, and then what event. And this is one that your mileage will vary to, but I did say one debate event or up to 2 speech events. Most students are always going to pick just one regardless, but just letting them know they have that option because that matches the options that they have at high school. And then I had a few lines down here just for additional information. Some students have other information, like I had some people say I have a piano rehearsal on a certain day or a different conflict, and just letting them know that they can give you that info right there is always good. The final form that I do recommend to do is a health and permission form, and this is just a catch-all. I don't really think I'm going to need this, but I'd rather have it than not. And so if there is any medical emergency at the school during practice, I have this available to me, as well as a permission just from the student and the parent, just to say that they're giving their permission to the student, and the student is saying like, hey, I understand all of these things and I'll abide by them. And so I'm going to go through a couple of different things on this middle school program. I do hope you find it useful. I'll try to include some of these examples for download as well through links, but I do think it's something that a lot of different programs could use as a recruitment tool. I like to use this kind of program at the end of the high school season. Ours ends usually toward the beginning of March, and then I can take about a month or two into the Mother's Day weekend in order to get this. At least that's the plan. We haven't done this in 9 years, like I said, so we're going to see how it goes. But that's just an overview of how I introduced it. We're going to see how this video turns out, and we'll go from there.